Hi guys, in this video we're going to have a look at the circumference of circles. So we're going to have a look at the different ways we use the formula, where we start with the diameter and the radius. We're going to look at how we go back when we've actually given the circumference to find the diameter and the radius. And we're also going to have a look at how we work out the perimeter of semicircles, quarter circles, three-quarters of a circle, and have a look at one sort of type of question that could come up in relation to circumference of circles. Okay, so let's get cracking. Hopefully you know, if you don't, not a problem. So work out the circumference of a circle. We do pi times the diameter. Okay, so it's different to the area. Area is pi r squared. Okay, the squared is your hint that that's the area because the units would be centimeters squared. Whereas the circumference is just the length, and that's how I remember the difference. It's entirely up to you how you try and remember it. There are a few different songs and different bits and pieces that you could learn, but the circumference is pi times the diameter. So if we look at our circle here, where I'm given the diameter, to work out the circumference of this, quite simply, it's just pi times 9, because that is a diameter. Now, if the question says leave your answer in terms of pi, that would just be 9 pi. Pi times 9, we simplify that to be 9 pi. But of course, they may want you to leave it as an actual decimal. So 9 times by pi. So sometimes you have to do shift. Pi might be different doing your calculator, but just have a little look. Shift pi, so 9 pi. Obviously, the calculator simplifies it to be in terms of pi first. If I press SD, I get 28.274, etc., etc. So if I round this to one decimal place, 2 is the first decimal place, 7 tells me to round it up, so 28.3 centimeters, because the circumference is just a length, not an area. Okay, let's have a look at this one then. So this time I'm given the radius, not the diameter. So all I'm going to do is just double the radius to tell me what the diameter is. So if I double 5, I'm going to have the diameter of 10 centimeters. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So the circumference will be pi times the diameter. So in this case, it's pi times by 10. So in terms of pi, that's 10 pi. And if you type that into your calculator, it comes out obviously with 10 pi. And as a decimal, 31.4159, etc., etc. So to one decimal place again, 4 is the first decimal place, 1 tells me to round down, so 31.4 centimeters. Okay, so there's the most two common ones. So now I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to try and work out the diameter. So here we go. If the circumference of a circle is 32 pi, what is the diameter? So all I'm going to do is write down my formula. So the circumference equals pi times diameter. I'm going to substitute in what I know. Well, I know the circumference is 32 pi. And of course, pi is just pi, and then times the diameter. And all we're going to do is rearrange it. So I'm a massive fan of the flowchart. So I'm going to have my diameter. What do I do with it? I times it by pi. And then I get the answer of 32 pi. So then I'm going to go backwards. And when we go backwards, we do the opposite. So instead of timesing by pi, I divide by pi. And 32 pi divided by pi is just 32. Of course, centimeters. Same sort of question here. If the circumference of a circle is 22 pi, what is the radius? And notice the units have changed. So that was centimeters, which is why it was centimeters. This one here is meters, so I must be careful when writing my final answer. But let's just have a look. If I have the circumference, and that equals pi times the diameter. So if I have the radius, like I did here, so again, flowchart. If I have the radius, what do I have to do? I have to double it, which gives me the diameter. I then times the diameter by pi, and then that gives me the circumference, which we know is 22 pi, like so. And then I have to go backwards. 22 pi oh, that was times, divided by pi, divided by 2, just do the opposite as you go backwards, gets back to the radius. So 22 pi divided by pi is obviously 22. Divide that by 2, we have the radius to be, oh, and then he did it, that is 11 meters, because the units there has changed. So it's not 11 centimeters, it's 11 meters. So again, just be careful. Okay, so there's some of the more basic questions. Let's step it up a gear. So here we have some semicircles and a quarter of a circle and 3/4 of a circle. And notice the question's changed. It doesn't ask us for the circumference anymore, it asks us for the perimeter. And I'll explain why in a minute. So we know we got pi times the diameter is going to tell us the whole circumference, and that's what I'm going to work out. I'm going to do pi times by the diameter, in this case it's 12. That's going to give me the whole circle. I don't want the whole circle, I want half of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to times it by a half. Now of course you can divide it by 2. Of course you can times that by 0.5, which is just the decimal equivalent of a half. That's absolutely fine. All of those will get you the right answer. But when it comes to working out the arc length of shapes, or arc length of circles, they use a fraction. So that's the only reason why I'm doing it like this. But as I said, divide it by 2 or times it by 0.5 is absolutely fine as well. Okay, so a half times by pi times by 12. Well, that's going to give me 12 pi, times it by a half is going to give me 6 pi. Now what most people do is they leave it like that, but the question says work out the perimeter. All I've done is work out half the circumference, which is obviously part of the question, but that just tells me this. It just tells me this length there, because it's half the circumference. What you must do and remember to do, and what most people forget to do, is then go back and add 12 because it wants the perimeter. So the perimeter is actually going to be 6 pi, which is half the circumference, plus 12. And if it wants the answer in terms of pi, that's how you leave it. You don't say 18 pi, you can't do that, because it's like the same as simplifying expressions. That's 6 pi, that's just 12. If it was 6 pi plus 12 pi, then you can do it, then you can add them, but they can't because they're different. So in terms of pi, that's how you'll leave it. But if it does want the actual answer, let's work that out. So I have 6 pi, add 12, which gives me 30.849, etc., etc. So to 1 decimal place, 8 is the 1 decimal place, 4 tells you to round down, so that would be 30.8 centimetres. Okay, exactly the same thing, but this time with a quarter of a circle. So calculate the perimeter again. Be careful, when you have a quarter of a circle, chances are they'll give you the radius. So the first thing you're going to do is work out the diameter, which is just going to be 2 times 7, so just double it, which is 14. Okay, so the first thing to do is work out the diameter. In this case, it would be 14. Then, just like with the question above, we're going to work out the whole circumference. So that's going to be pi times the diameter, which we just worked out as 14. But I don't want the whole circumference, I just want a quarter of it. So I'm going to times it by 1/4. Now again, you could divide it by 4, or you could times it by 0.25, which is the decimal equivalent. Absolutely fine, get you the right answer, but I just like working with fractions. Okie dokie, so the perimeter then, let's just work that out. So 1/4 times by pi times by 14 gives me 7/2 pi. So the perimeter will be 7/2 pi. But again, remember it's the perimeter. I've just worked out what a quarter of the circumference is. So I've just worked out that length. To work out the perimeter, I then need to add 7 and then add another 7. Okay, because they're both radiuses, they'll both be the same length. In which case, in terms of pi, it will be 7 over 2 pi plus 14. And as a decimal, I already have 7 over 2 pi there, so I'm just going to add my 14 and press equals. So that gives me 24.9955, etc., etc. So to one decimal place. That 9 tells me to round up, so that 9 will become a 10, which means I carry 1 over there. So that'll be 25.0, and centimetres are the units I'm using. Okie dokie, so you've probably already guessed it, this one here, same as before. First thing you need to do is work out the diameter, which is doubling the radius. So the diameter is 28 in this case. And then I'm going to work out the whole circumference by doing pi times the diameter. I want 3/4 of the circumference, just the 3/4 around there, in which, just as before, you can divide this by 4 and then times it by 3, or you can times it by 0.75. But again, I'm going to stick with my fraction because that's what I prefer, but it's entirely up to you. Times by pi times by 28, and that gives me 21 pi. I suppose it's obvious, isn't it? 3/4 of 28. Sorry, I'm being silly. Yep, so 21 pi is the circumference. So again, just that length around there. So if you want the perimeter, you have to do your 21 pi plus 14, which is the radius there, and then plus the other 14. So in terms of pi, the perimeter is 21 pi plus 28, and as a decimal, it will be 93.973, etc., etc. So to one decimal place, 7 to round the 9 up. Oh, it's the same thing again. So I need to add 1 to the 3 and have 0.0 centimetres. So 94.0 centimetres is the perimeter of that shape. So just be very, very careful about remembering to add on those extras. Okay, and the final example I've got for you is a sort of exam type question. So a bike wheel has a radius of 25 centimetres. If I ride my bike in a straight line and the wheel makes 130 complete turns, how far have I gone to the nearest metre? So, first thing we'll do is draw my wheel. Here's my wheel. The radius is 25. So I'm going to work out the diameter, which is 2 times 25. So the diameter is 50 centimetres. Then I'm going to work out the circumference, which is obviously, again, the length around the outside. So that's pi times 50, which is 50 pi. Now, I make 130 complete turns. So 50 pi times by 130. Let's see what that gives us. So 50 pi times by 130. That's going to give me 20,420. I'm going to leave it as that, centimetres. But it says, how far have I gone to the nearest metre? So the next thing I'm going to do is convert this centimetres into metres. And I do that by dividing by 100. So divide by 100. So that's going to give me 204.2 metres. And then it says, how far have I gone to the nearest metre? So 204.2. So nearest metre would just be 204 metres. So it's just using the circumference there to answer that question, basically. So hopefully that helps, guys. A few things to watch out for with these, remembering to add the diameter and the radiuses here. Nothing to be afraid of here. Just make sure you draw a little diagram to help you to understand the question, and just remember the formula, and you shouldn't have any issues. So hopefully that helps, guys. Thanks for watching.